Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate Day 447, May the 31st, 2018, Thursday. Thank you so much for tuning in. My. Absolutely bombshell article today by Lee Smith. Unbelievable timing because it was just 3 days ago, that I was saying that I really think to get to the next level of understanding exactly what went on with the Spygate or the frame-up, whatever you want to call it, is that we really need to look at these guys at the operational level. And there are two specifically, and that would be Mr. Halper and Mr. Downer. And then we have the third guy, the kind of mystery man on all of this, who's gone missing, Mr. Mifsud, who you will learn today from this Lee Smith article has been located. So we're going to get to that. Let me get some of these headlines out of the way and we'll get right into that. Well, as most of you know now, the IG report is going to be out any day now. We know that because they've already scheduled the hearing for the 5th of June, which I believe is Tuesday, I think. So that is going to be when they're going to have the hearing with Michael Horowitz, the cleanup man, the custodian. And we know that they never hold these hearings until after the report has been released to the public in redacted form. So we can assume that, be pretty sure that the IG report will be out before Tuesday of next week, the 5th. Now, it could be released on the morning of the 5th, the same day as the hearings, but my guess is it might be released the night before, or probably, it wouldn't be released on a Sunday. I'm thinking it's probably going to be released on Monday, sometime Monday, maybe in the evening, afternoon, and then Tuesday, the 5th, is when IG Horowitz will go in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is Charles Grassley, and he will answer some questions. Again, as I've said, I think that the IG report is going to look an awful lot like what we saw with the McCabe report, whereas the IG is just going to show us the things that were done that maybe shouldn't have been done, the things that were not done that probably should have been done, and the problems with that. The names will likely be all redacted, but we should be able to figure out a lot of them. I don't think he's going to make a case for a wider conspiracy or anything like that. I do not know if after his report comes out, if he's immediately going to make criminal referrals. He did the McCabe report, and then a week later he said that he put up the letter for criminal referrals to the DOJ. Of course, that's Rod Rodenstein. So I expect that we're going to see a very similar thing here. And I think the most that we could hope to gain from this Inspector General's report is that hopefully it shines enough light on the corruption that went on that it motivates Sessions to appoint a special counsel. That is what I think is the most that we can hope for. Horowitz is not going to lay out the grand conspiracy and call it the conspiracy or even tie everything together. He is going to show us what was done that shouldn't have been and what wasn't done that should have been, just like he did with the McCabe report. He might make a criminal referral. As far as what role Mr. Huber has to play in all this, well, he's a prosecutor with the ability to convene a grand jury and serve subpoenas, but as far as we know, none of that's happened. Maybe it has happened and we just don't know about it. Whatever's going on with Mr. Huber, he's been around now for 7 months, more than that, 8 months, and we haven't seen anything from Mr. Huber yet. Doesn't mean we won't, but at this point, I have no idea what Mr. Huber's doing. He's not even in Washington. He's in Utah. So we'll just have to wait and see, but we can be pretty damn sure the IG report will be out by next Tuesday, the 5th. So that's good news. We'll see what we get. Trump, of course, busy on the Twitter. And in the last 2 days, he's had some pretty radical tweets. Again, he tweeted out, I believe this was this morning, he says, "I wish I would have hired somebody else for the Attorney General." And and then one day after that, and this is, of course, coming one day after the tweet he did 2 days ago, which is where he said that Sessions should unrecuse himself. Now, it's kind of funny what happened in the last 2 days. Trump tweets out 2 days ago that he thinks Sessions should unrecuse himself, which, of course, I've been saying for months. There's no reason why Jeff Sessions should still remain recused from whatever is going on in these investigations. I think he's thoroughly been cleared. At least that's what we thought. And then the next day, Trump comes out in the morning and says, I wish I would have hired somebody else to be the Attorney General. I mean, if your boss was saying things about you like that, you would take it as, I think he wants me to resign. I think this is my boss's way of telling me he wants me to quit. I mean, that's the way I would take it. So I don't know if that's the way Trump means it, but that's the way I would take it if I were the Attorney General and the President was tweeting out, I wish I would have hired someone else as the Attorney General, and especially when the day before, he says he wished he would have recused himself, or he wished his Attorney General would have recused himself. I mean, I would take that as a pretty strong message that the President doesn't want me around anymore. But Sessions continues to hang in there even though he's not wanted. Now, what's even more interesting is that later today we get the story that pops up on the Daily Caller, which says that Sessions is still under investigation by Mueller. Now, who leaked that? The only one who would know it is someone on Mueller's team. So, 2 days after Trump says Sessions should unrecuse himself, here we get someone from the Mueller investigation leaking that Sessions is actually still under investigation, and that he could be the key witness against Trump, because they know that at some point Trump had asked Sessions not to recuse himself. Right after Sessions was sworn in, literally the very next day, he recuses himself. And Trump basically has a conversation with him and says, you shouldn't have recused yourself, or what have you, and wants him to unrecuse himself. So this is what Mueller's got, apparently. It's ridiculous. It's nothing. So Trump's allowed to give his opinion to his Attorney General and say, I think you should unrecuse yourself. You shouldn't have done that, or whatever. I mean, he's not impeding the investigation, and that's what obstruction would require. Obstruction requires that you actually take some measures to impede an investigation. This would not come anywhere near meeting that, and Mueller knows it. He's got to keep it going, though. He's got to keep it going. Okay. Let's move on to something else here before I get to that. Well, negotiations with Kim Jong-Un in North Korea continue. The North Korean representative actually came to Washington today, and he's meeting with Pompeo right now. So I guess we'll find out what they hammer out in the negotiations. But the latest word is that Kim Jong-un does not have any intention of giving up his nuke. Just as I said a couple of days ago, he wants to hold on to the nuke and join the world community and be treated with the same respect of every other nuclear power. And that's what he really wants. He might give up everything else. But it appears that there may be one major key negotiating point which might be able to budge Kim Jong-un. Something he desperately wants, dreams about, and the thing that could turn the whole deal in Trump's favor. It appears that this major negotiating tool, this thing that they may be able to give Kim Jong-un, which could solidify the deal so that it actually goes down and becomes a great success, would be to guarantee Kim Jong-un get a McDonald's in Pyongyang. He wants a McDonald's. That's what you got to give Kim Jong-un. He wants a McDonald's in Pyongyang. That will be a tough negotiation. I bet you, when this representative came in today, I bet you they ordered lunch from McDonald's. So that he can go back to North Korea and say, oh, President Kim, I had the Big Mac, the large fries. I had it all. We've got to have a McDonald's in Pyongyang. We'll see how that works out. Well, some of you saw that disturbing performance by Trey Gowdy on Fox News. I know we have a lot of Trey Gowdy fans here, people in South Carolina that like him, or whatever, that's fine. But I hope you saw that interview with Trey Gowdy. It left a lot of people's jaws on the floor. Not mine, really. I was surprised. But essentially, we have Trey Gowdy and Marco Rubio in the last couple of days coming out and saying they don't see any evidence that the Obama administration was spying on the Trump campaign, and that they were only investigating Russians. The spy was put in there to investigate Russians. Well, if anybody had any doubts about Mr. Gowdy, the pit poodle, or little Marco, there should no longer be any doubts in your mind. Now, let's keep in mind that in the presidential campaign, in the primaries, Trey Gowdy supported Marco Rubio. Trey Gowdy was backing Marco Rubio. That was his guy. I think he campaigned for him. I know there's photos of the two on a stage together during the campaign. And let's also remember that the man who originally paid Confusion GPS to do oppositional research on Republican candidates in the field was Paul Singer. Paul Singer of the Washington Beacon, the billionaire. Let's not forget that Paul Singer of the Washington Free Beacon, the billionaire who paid initially for the opposition research from Confusion GPS, was a Marco Rubio supporter. He was a Marco Rubio supporter, the guy who did the initial deal with Fusion GPS before the primaries ended. Trump won, and then at that point, the Right Reverend Clinton began paying Confusion GPS. So there you go, two peas in a pod. Now, my deal with Trey Gowdy is, I honestly think Trey Gowdy, he's leaving the Congress, so he's auditioning for his next job, which I believe is probably he's going to run for some judge in South Carolina. He's going to run for a judgeship in South Carolina, most likely. And so I think for Trey Gowdy right now, it's totally pure political posturing for his own personal next step in life to be a judge or something, or some other position. He's basically preparing himself for a job audition, probably another elected office, and he understands the politics in South Carolina, and so he's trying to walk both sides of the fence so that he can go back to South Carolina and get Republicans to support him, to think he was on their side, and then at the same time he can show other clips or say other things about positions he took, which will help him get more independents and some Democrat votes. So I think it's totally purely personal for Trey Gowdy. He could care less about Trump, about what's going on in Washington or any of that. He's just coasting out the rest of his time, laying the groundwork for his next career move, which is probably to be a judge. And so all this is just really personal politics for him, I think. So that's just how I see it with Trey Gowdy, but very disappointed in his confusing and bewildering sort of rambling interview he did with Fox News, and the points he was trying to make. Just there's a lot of problems with it. I'm not even going to go into it too much. Too many other things more important. But anyway, that's my thoughts on that. We have Ben Rhodes coming out with a new book. Of course, he was the person in the Obama administration, a national security advisor, with number 2 below Susan Rice. He's got a new book coming out, and he's saying that Obama and the top aides to Obama did not know about the FBI investigating Trump, and they didn't learn about it until after they left office, and when they heard about it on TV. That's when they learned about it. Of course, we know this is total bullshit, complete lie. There's overwhelming evidence that the Obama and the top people in the Obama administration, you had Susan Rice doing the unmaskings, and I'm sure Ben Rhodes did a few unmaskings himself. To suggest that they didn't know anything about this operation investigating Trump is a huge load of BS. And go ahead and write your book, Mr. Rhodes, and go ahead and put that in there. You might find yourself also in front of a grand jury, and you also probably may be looking at some jail time. By the way, if you hear like weird noises and things like that, there's a thunderstorm going on right now. We just had a big lightning strike over here, so it didn't hit me, so I guess I'm still good. We'll keep going. Well, Harvey Weinstein, the Right Reverend Clinton, big donor to Right Reverend Clinton and a big bundler of money to the Democratic Party, of course, was indicted this morning on rape charges. Okay, that brings us to the Bombshell article today by Lee Smith. Beautiful timing, because just a couple of days ago I was saying that I really want to start focusing now on just a couple of characters which I believe are very, very key. And we need to get these individuals information from these individuals, because they will fill in a lot of the missing pieces that we need to complete this puzzle. But the problem is they are making themselves very unavailable. And I'm talking about Mr. Halper and Mr. Mifsud. Now, I believe Mr. Halper and Mr. Downer were operators. I believe Mr. Downer was an operator participating in the plot. I believe that Mr. Halper was the agent provocateur running the plot. And I believe that Mr. Mifsud was probably used, like Papadopoulos. Before I thought he was part of the plot, but after reading Lee Smith's article, now I'm starting to believe that he was a lot like Carter Page and Papadopoulos. He too was used in this plot. You're going to see why in just a moment. So we're going to drill down here on Mr. Mifsud and what we learned from this article by Lee Smith. First of all, let's just do a real brief bio. It gets into it more in this as I go through it about Mr. Mifsud, but just basically, Mr. Mifsud, of course, was this identified in the dossier as a professor, the person who allegedly told Papadopoulos that the Russians had damaging material on Hillary Clinton. And then, allegedly, Mr. Papadopoulos told Mr. Downer in a conversation that the Russians had this, and I assume he told him it came from Mr. Mifsud. So that's the bottom line there. Of course, Mifsud is from Malta. He's a Maltese academic. He's not Russian. He has connections, though, to various Russian groups, but mostly Western politicians and political organizations and intelligence agencies and things and such, specifically the UK, the British. Of course, we know he was at the London Centre of International Law, as well as the London Centre of International Energy, which is the organization he joined just 2 months before Papadopoulos. And he's the one who approached Papadopoulos there at the London International Energy Center and began their, friendship, if you want to call it that. Of course, up until today, the whereabouts of Mr. Mifsud were unknown. We know that WikiLeaks did a major story, dropped a lot of information showing close ties of Mr. Mifsud to British intelligence. We also know Mr. Mifsud is a member of the European Council on Foreign Relations, which is #1 top donor, the guy who runs that whole program, George Soros. Mr. Mifsud is a self-described Clintonist. He said he only belongs to one organization, which is kind of a lie. He belongs to a lot of things. And that is the Clinton Foundation, where he claims to be a member. No one really knows what he means by a member because no one's aware that you can be a member of the Clinton Foundation. Only a donor and someone who receives the benefit from being a donor. So, the two key players are Halper and Mifsud. Right now, Downer as well, along with Halper. I think they were a tag team effort working together. But Mr. Mifsud is the mystery man, so we're going to talk a little bit about Mr. Mifsud now. And this is all based on a book that is supposed to be coming out. Whether or not this book ever hits the shelves, I'll be very surprised based on what is going to be in the book. But apparently, Lee Smith from RealClearInvestigations.com, I will be providing the link to this article. I highly recommend you read it. I will post the link down below the description on this video. Click on the link. It'll take you to RealClearInvestigations.com and you can read this Lee Smith story for yourself. I'm going to cover some of the main topics of the story. Basically, Lee Smith has interviewed two individuals. They are this man named Mr. Rowe, R-O-H, who is a close friend and investor in a couple of business ventures with Mr. Mifsud and has known him for 20 years. Also, he spoke with this other person, a woman named Thierry Pastor, who is a French political analyst and investigative reporter. Together, they decided to write this book, and it centers mostly around Mr. Mifsud and his role in this whole Russian Spygate story. So they actually went and interviewed Mifsud because Mr. Rowe knows him quite well. He's a close friend. He knows exactly where Misfit is and where he's been. And he's going to tell us. He's there right now. And this theory pastor is the professional writer, the journalist. So this journalist used Mr. Rowe, who she knew could get her to Misfit, and they got together and decided, worked out a deal with Misfit, and I guess he agreed, and they sat down for this interview. Here is what we learn from this interview with Mr. Misfit. Let's see. Alrighty. There is a new book by former colleague of Joseph Mifsud. This new book is essentially by Stephen Rowe, a former friend or currently friend and former business colleague of Mr. Mifsud, along with this French writer and political analyst reporter whose name is Theory Pastor. Let's see. Mr. Rowe is also a lawyer, by the way. He practices law in Switzerland and Germany. They are reporting from their interview with Mr. Misfit that he is alive and well. He has recently been interviewed by these two, and in this interview, Misfit denies saying anything about Clinton emails to Papadopoulos. He vehemently denies it and asks, same question I've been asking for a long time, where would I get this information? Exactly. If this information were true, it would be held at as close to as it possibly could be at the highest levels of the Russian government and the intelligence agencies. And so he's asking exactly what I was saying, is where would he get this information? He has no connections to people that would get him at those high-level sources. And even if you did, those people wouldn't leak it. And even if they did, they'd be dead in a New York minute. And whoever they leaked it to would be dead in a New York minute. Mr. Misfit is a pretty smart guy. He understands this. And if someone even tried to come up and give him that information, he would probably run as fast as he could the other way, because you would be dead very quickly after receiving that information. He understands this. So, again, the major point, exactly what I suggested 2 days ago. We were told that Misfit told Papadopoulos about the Russians having this dirt, and I said a couple days ago, I'm not so sure I believe that. I mean, Halper is playing everyone else. Maybe Halper was playing Misfit. And either Misfit didn't say it at all, or Misfit was told to say it. But as it turns out here, according to this interview with Lee Smith interviewing these two people, one who's known Misfit and is a good friend for 20 years, and the investigative reporter who sat down with him just recently for this interview. Recently, he vehemently denies saying anything to Papadopoulos about Clinton, emails, or anything else. It's funny because Alexander Down the Hatch Downer also said that Papadopoulos never said anything about emails. Downer said that Papadopoulos only said that Russians may have material that could be damaging to Clinton. Downer said Papadopoulos never used the word emails at all. Just damaging information. Mr. Rowe, who's a close friend of Mr. Mifsud, says that it's a silly accusation that Mifsud is a Russian agent. He said it's more likely that Mr. Mifsud is a British agent, seeing as how he has worked for the UK training British intelligence officers and military intelligence people. Mifsud was told to go into hiding after Papadopoulos' name became public. He was told to go into hiding from an Italian official named Vincenzo Scotti. Vincenzo Scotti, an Italian government official, is the one who told Misfit, hey, you better go hide. Misfit has been hiding in Italy, in the countryside, in Italy, probably being protected by the Italian government. And we all know what's going on in Italy right now. A lot of chaos. Mifsud has deep ties to Western political and intelligence apparatchiks and the apparatus that they all belong to. That's according to Mr. Rowe, who's known him for 20 years. His ties are to the West, not to Russia. Of course, we know that he taught. Mr. Mifsud was an instructor at Link University. Link University in Rome, Italy, where that's a spy school where they train spies. This is where Mr. Mifsud was not just training British spies, but spies from the CIA and other Western spy agencies. Not Russians. No Russians train at Link University. Only Western nations train their spies at Link University. That's where Mr. Mifsud was an instructor. Papadopoulos paid a visit there. And let's not forget that when the FBI went to meet Steele, they met in Rome, Italy. At the very time that Mifsud and Papadopoulos were running around there. The FBI did interview Mifsud. Oh yeah. The FBI interviewed Mifsud in February of 27, somewhere between the 10th and the 12th. 2 weeks after interviewing Papadopoulos, the FBI interviewed Mifsud. Mifsud was in town to speak at a function for an organization that has been a partner of the United States State Department for over 50 years. So the FBI goes and interviews Papadopoulos. He tells them that Mr. Mifsud told him that there was some damaging information that the Russians might have on Hillary, and then Papadopoulos is charged with lying 6 or 7 times to the FBI. Is this one of the lies he told? Because 2 weeks later, the FBI goes and talks to Mifsud, and they didn't have to go far because he was in Washington, D.C., giving a speech representing an organization that has a close association and has been a partner with the State Department for over 50 years. Whose State Department? The Rotten Reverend Clinton and John Kerry, their State Department under the Obama administration. So, you have to believe at this point that if they believe that Mr. Mifsud was actually a Russian agent, then they let a Russian agent go free. That they had a Russian spy right there in their grasp and they let him go. And now he's hiding in Italy because he was told to by an Italian government official who knows some people and knows some things. Mifsud told Rowe in this interview that Papadopoulos, he described Papadopoulos, this is Mifsud saying how he describes Papadopoulos: aggressive, ambitious, and quick to seize on an opportunity, eager to be accepted. Boy, you talk about a perfect target. No wonder Mr. Halper worked so hard to get to Papadopoulos. That's exactly what you want. A dude who's aggressive, ambitious, quick to seize an opportunity, and eager to be accepted. Oh my goodness. I mean, that probably gave Mr. Halper an erection. 2009, Joseph Mifsud appeared with the Deputy Secretary of State, Strobe Talbot, under the Rotten Reverend Clinton at a symposium of some sort. So here we have Mr. Mifsud just back in 2009 appearing with the Department of Secretary of State under the Rotten Reverend Clinton, Strobe Talbot. That was 1 year after Obama was elected. It was Obama's second year. Hillary's second year as Secretary of State. The guy right underneath her, Strobe Talbot. And he was at a speaking event with Mr. Mifsud. More Clinton connection. Mifsud told Rowe that he believed he was set up. He too, just like Papadopoulos, just like Carter Page, just like, what's his name, Mike Caputo, it appears that Mr. Mifsud also feels like he was played. Rowe believes, and his book will show, that Mifsud was a person used by someone else, and I think we know who that someone else is, to carry out a job for ends and results of which he was unaware. Mifsud's job, according to Mifsud, telling Rowe, Mifsud believes his job was simply to take meetings that would dirty up Papadopoulos. My oh my. Do you think that book will ever see release? Now we know why they don't want us to know about about Mr. Mifsud, and now you know why they're trying so hard to keep Mr. Halper away from us. Because Mr. Halper is going to be asked the question, have you ever met a man named Joseph Mifsud? Are you familiar with a man named Mr. Downer? When's the last time you had a conversation, Mr. Halper, with Mr. Mifsud? How did that conversation go? Did you ask him to tell Papadopoulos that the Russians had blackmail material on Hillary Clinton? Did you suggest to him that you could get blackmail material and provide it to him so he could give it to Mr. Papadopoulos or someone in the Trump campaign? These are the questions that Mr. Halper does not want to know. And of course, another reason they didn't want us to know Mr. Halper's name is because they know as soon as you Google him, the very first thing that pops up is how he was involved in 1980 working for the Reagan administration of planting a spy inside the Jimmy Carter administration, inside his foreign policy team. And so Halper put a guy inside Carter's team, and this guy was relaying the information of foreign policy discussions back to Halper, who was then giving it back to Reagan's team so they could figure out a strategy how to take on Carter. And because how they had all of his him and his advisors discussions about foreign policy, it made it pretty easy to come up with a counter to how to combat Jimmy Carter in a debate on foreign policy, because they had his secrets. And that was Mr. Halper that engineered that. And then people might ask themselves, gee, is it often that presidents put spies into effect in other campaigns during political seasons or what have you? Is that something that we do very often? And that would lead people to Google that, and they would eventually learn that, in fact, it wasn't just done in the Reagan deal with Mr. Halper. It was also done in the Lyndon Baines Johnson administration. They also used spies, and we know that because they admitted to it. The number one man, Mr. Colby of the CIA, admitted that Johnson ordered him, as did the FBI director at that time. Both admitted that Johnson ordered them to run a spy operation on his political opposition. So this is not like it's something new. It's just that this time they got caught, or they're going to get caught. And that is why we now know that Mr. Mifsud apparently was not part of the scam, but was rather used, if he's telling the truth, just the same way that Page was used, the same way that Papadopoulos was used, the same way that Cavuto, or whatever his name was, Caputo, the same way he was used. And it looks like Mr. Halper was the agent provocateur that was instigating all of this. That's why they don't want us to know about him. That's why they won't admit that he was the man. That's why they've got this guy buried deep somewhere, hiding, protecting him, or whatever. He is the man right now that needs to be interviewed, put in front of a grand jury, because getting his testimony will unravel a lot of this and unravel a lot of the plot. He is that missing piece that we've had for so long, that just you knew there had to be another piece of the puzzle missing. And we're now narrowing it down to Mr. Halper. He was the missing link. I'll provide the link to the article. Be sure you read it. And we'll be back with more TowerGate tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.